Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking into a case that's, well, it's heartbreaking and it's also really baffling. The unsolved murder of Michelle Lawless. Have you heard of this one?
I have. Yeah, it's one of those cases that sticks with you. It makes you wonder, what really happened.
It really does. So for this deep dive, we've got a pretty interesting mix of sources. We've got Michelle's diaries, court transcripts from the trial, and even some forensic reports.
Oh, wow. And those forensic reports, are those from the original investigation or?
Actually.
Yeah.
These are from a team of forensic experts over in the Netherlands. They were brought in later to re-examine some of the evidence.
That's fascinating. I'm always interested in seeing how new technology and techniques can shed light on old cases.
Yeah, me too. And in this case, it definitely adds another layer of complexity. So Michelle Lawless, she was a 19-year-old college student. She lived in Benton, Missouri. And she was tragically murdered back in 1992. Now we want to be upfront about this right from the start. This case is unsolved.
Okay, so even though someone was initially convicted, Michelle's killer is still out there.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive even more compelling.
Hmm.
We're going to examine the evidence, question everything, and maybe even come up with our own theories along the way. Who knows, maybe one of us will have a breakthrough.
I like that. I'm always up for a good challenge.
Me too. So to add another wrinkle to all of this case also involves a wrongful conviction. A young man named Josh Kaiser spent 16 years in prison.
16 years.
16 years for a crime he didn't commit.
Wow, that's just unbelievable.
It is, and it really highlights how important it is to constantly question and re-examine evidence, especially in cases like this where the stakes are so high.
Right, because justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, it's also about protecting the innocent.
Exactly. So let's set the scene a little bit. It's a cold November night in 1992. Deputy Rick Walter gets a call about a car off the road. It's down a steep embankment. When he arrives, he finds Michelle's car. The lights are still on, the engine's running, and inside Michelle is slumped over, lifeless.
Oh gosh, that's just a chilling scene to imagine.
I know. And the crime scene itself was chaotic and brutal. There's a blood trail leading from the highway down to the car. It suggests a struggle took place. Michelle was shot 3 times at close range.
3 times at close range, that sounds very personal. Not a random act of violence at all.
No, it doesn't, does it? And that's what makes it even more jarring when you read Michelle's diary entries. She comes across as such a vibrant young woman, full of life, dreams, worries, typical teenage stuff. She talks to her boyfriend, Leon Lamb.
Yeah.
They went to the movies, hung out with friends, just normal kid stuff.
So this wasn't some troubled teen who was mixed up in something dangerous.
Not at all. And that's what makes the brutality of her death even more difficult to comprehend.
Right, because it really makes you wonder what could have led to such a violent end.
Exactly. And of course, in a case like this, the boyfriend is always going to be a suspect.
Naturally.
He was the last person to admit seeing her alive. And those diary entries, they reveal a relationship that wasn't always smooth sailing.
Oh, so they had their ups and downs.
There were arguments, disagreements, like many couples.
That makes sense.
But here's the thing. No other fingerprints or DNA were found at the crime scene besides Leon's.
Really?
Yeah, and this is even though there were signs of a struggle.
So how is that even possible?
Well, forensic science back then wasn't as advanced as it is today. Touch DNA analysis, which can pick up tiny skin cells, wasn't widely used yet.
I see. So it's possible that there was other DNA present, but they just couldn't detect it with the methods they had at the time.
Exactly. But here's another wrinkle to consider. Leon passed a polygraph test.
A lie detector test.
Right.
But those aren't always reliable, are they?
You're right. They're not foolproof. They can be influenced by a lot of factors. Nerves, anxiety, even the skill of the examiner. But back then, it was considered a pretty standard investigative tool.
So we've got a brutal crime scene, a boyfriend who had a somewhat rocky relationship with the victim, and a polygraph test that doesn't really give us a clear answer.
Exactly. But the story takes a sharp turn when a 17-year-old kid named Josh Kaiser enters the picture.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. How does a 17-year-old with seemingly no connection to Michelle end up getting caught up in all of this?
That's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
and that's what we're going to dive into next. So we left off with Josh Kaiser, this 17-year-old kid, becoming a suspect in Michelle's murder.
Yeah, how did that even happen?
Right, he had no apparent connection to Michelle. But the prosecution, they built their case against him, largely on the testimonies of jailhouse informants. Those are individuals who claim that Josh had confessed to the crime while he was behind bars.
Wait, so he was already in jail for something else?
Yeah, he was in for an unrelated offense.
Okay, but, jailhouse informants, they're not exactly known for their reliability. It seems like those kinds of testimonies could be easily manipulated or even completely fabricated.
You're exactly right. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. Those informants later admitted they had made up their stories. They claimed they'd been coerced or offered leniency in their own cases in exchange for providing incriminating information about Josh.
Wow, so they basically threw Josh under the bus to save themselves.
Yeah, it's a really sad reality of the justice system sometimes.
It really is. It makes you wonder how many other innocent people might be behind bars based on this kind of flimsy evidence.
It's a disturbing thought for sure. And to make matters even worse, a woman named Chantel Kreider came forward as a surprise witness.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she claimed that she had seen Josh arguing with Michelle at a Halloween party, just days before the murder.
So that would put Josh in direct contact with Michelle right before her death. It seems like that would be a pretty damning piece of evidence.
It would be, except for one major problem. The Halloween party that Chantel described never actually happened.
Oh, come on. Are you serious?
I'm totally serious. Witnesses confirmed that Josh wasn't even in town on the night of the alleged party.
So this woman just completely made up this story.
It seems that way, and sadly, her fabricated story played a role in Josh's conviction.
That is just mind-boggling to think that someone could just invent a story like that, and it would have such devastating consequences for someone else's life.
It really is a stark reminder of how fragile the justice system can be, and how important it is to carefully scrutinize every piece of evidence.
Absolutely.
And remember, that blood evidence the prosecution presented at trial,
Oh, yeah. What about that?
well, it turns out it wasn't even blood.
Seriously?
Yeah, they retested it later and found out it was something else entirely.
So basically, the prosecution's case was falling apart at the seams.
It was. And yet, based on those flawed testimonies and that debunked blood evidence, Josh Keezer was convicted and sentenced to 60 years in prison.
60 years?
He was only 17 years old.
That's just heartbreaking to think that he spent all those years locked up for a crime he didn't commit. It just doesn't seem right.
It's not right at all. And it's a stark reminder of the human cost of wrongful convictions. But here's where a glimmer of hope emerges. Remember Deputy Rick Walter, the one who initially responded to the scene?
Yeah, the one who found Michelle's body.
Exactly. Well, he had become the Scott County Sheriff by then. And something about Josh's conviction just didn't sit right with him.
So he had some doubts.
He couldn't shake the inconsistencies, the sense that justice hadn't really been served. So he took a really extraordinary step. He reopened the case.
Wow, even though it meant potentially undermining his own department's previous work.
Exactly. It's not every day that you see a law enforcement official willing to do that.
No, it's not. It speaks volumes about his character and his commitment to the truth.
I agree. So Sheriff Walter, he initiated a thorough review of all the evidence. He brought in new experts, including a team from the Netherlands who specialized in advanced forensic techniques.
Oh, I remember you mentioning that earlier, the team that did those additional forensic reports.
That's right. They were brought in specifically to analyze the DNA evidence using a technique called touch DNA analysis.
Touch DNA analysis.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It can detect even the faintest traces of skin cells left behind when someone touches an object.
Even after all those years.
Even after all those years.
That's incredible.
It really is. And this technique wasn't available back in the early 90s. So it had the potential to uncover new information that could change the entire course of the investigation.
So what did they find?
Well, they found traces of Mark Abbott's DNA on Michelle's clothing.
Wait, Mark Abbott, as in the guy who was the first to report finding Michelle's body?
The one and only?
But he claimed he had never even met Michelle, right?
That's what he said. But Michelle's friend, Melissa Gaines, contradicted that. She said that Michelle had mentioned meeting Mark and even thought he was attractive.
So Mark wasn't being entirely truthful about his connection to Michelle.
It seems that way. And Melissa also said that she had warned Michelle against getting involved with the Abbott brothers.
Oh, why was that?
Well, they had a bit of a shady reputation in the community.
What kind of reputation?
There were rumors that they were involved in drug trafficking.
Drug trafficking. Now that adds a whole new dimension to the case.
It does. It makes you wonder if Michelle might have stumbled upon some information about their activities, and that somehow put her in danger.
That's definitely a possibility.
And to make things even more complicated, Mark Abbott has an identical twin brother named Mac.
Identical twins.
Yep.
Oh, this is getting good.
And there's actually some confusion about which brother actually reported finding Michelle's body. Some people at the sheriff's office claim it was Matt who came in, but the official records show Mark's name.
Oh, wow. So even the basic facts of the case are a bit murky.
They are. And it just adds another layer of uncertainty to an already perplexing investigation.
So we got these new DNA findings pointing to Mark Abbott, a tangled web of relationships and rumors. And let's not forget about Leon Lamb.
Right, even though his DNA under Michelle's fingernails was explained, the absence of any other DNA at the crime scene besides Mark's is still strange.
It is, especially considering that Michelle was known to be tough. She had a green belt in karate. She wouldn't have gone down without a fight.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if the violence of the attack could suggest a crime of passion, maybe fueled by jealousy.
That's a good point. And Michelle's diary did mention Leon's jealousy and how she struggled with his behavior sometimes.
Exactly. And let's not forget that Michelle ran into Leon that very night she was killed, while she was out with some male friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he even admitted that seeing her with other men bothered him.
So it's possible that encounter could have triggered a confrontation later that night.
It's definitely a possibility. But here's the thing. The Dutch forensic team, with their advanced techniques, they couldn't find any of Leon's DNA at the actual crime scene.
So that doesn't completely rule him out, but it does add another layer of complexity to the investigation.
It does. It's a classic case of the evidence not quite adding up.
It is. It leaves us with more questions than answers.
And that's what makes this case so fascinating. But before we get into those lingering questions, let's take a moment to talk about Josh Kaiser. Remember, he was exonerated based on Sheriff Walter's reinvestigation. A judge even declared him actually innocent.
Yeah, what happened to him after he was released? I mean, 16 years is a long time to be wrongfully imprisoned. How do you even begin to rebuild your life after that?
It's a question that I've often wondered myself. Josh's story is both heartbreaking and incredibly inspiring.
How so?
Well, he was robbed of his youth, his freedom, the chance to experience life on his own terms. But instead of succumbing to bitterness and anger, he emerged from that experience with a remarkable sense of purpose.
That's amazing. So what did he do?
Well, he became an advocate for judicial reform. He worked to prevent others from suffering the same fate he did. And get this, he even chose to forgive those who were involved in his wrongful conviction.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. It takes a truly extraordinary person to do that.
It does. It shows a profound understanding of forgiveness and compassion. And here's something that really struck me. Josh even donated some of the money he received in compensation for his wrongful imprisonment. He donated it back to the Scott County Sheriff's Department. I know it sounds crazy, right?
Why would he do that?
He did it to help fund the ongoing investigation into Michelle's murder.
Oh, wow. That's just incredible.
It is. He understood that true justice meant finding the real perpetrator, not just releasing the wrongly convicted.
That's a really powerful message.
It is. It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable injustice, the human spirit can find a way to heal, to forgive, and to continue fighting for what's right.
It's a beautiful thing.
It really is. So with Josh's innocence established, the investigation shifted its focus back to those lingering questions. Who killed Michelle Lawless and why? All right, so we're back. And we're still trying to piece together this puzzle, the murder of Michelle Lawless. Josh Kaiser is finally free after 16 years, wrongfully convicted, but his life is forever changed by this ordeal. Then there's the Abbott brothers, shrouded in rumors and suspicion, and now their DNA is turning up on Michelle's clothing. And we can't forget about Leon, the boyfriend. Some evidence seems to rule him out, but there's still that lingering doubt.
Yeah, it's almost like a tangled web. So many different threads and connections, and they all seem to lead back to this small town, Benton, Missouri.
Right, and Sheriff Walter, he seems pretty convinced that Michelle knew her killer.
That makes sense. In a small town like that, secrets can be hard to keep. Everyone knows everyone else's business.
Exactly. And Sheriff Walter, he's hoping that a grand jury might help shake things loose.
A grand jury?
Yeah, they have the power to subpoena witnesses and compel them to testify under oath.
Oh, so they can force people to come forward and tell what they know.
Exactly. Maybe someone out there knows something crucial, something that could finally crack this case wide open.
Yeah, or maybe just the threat of being called before a grand jury might be enough to persuade someone to break their silence.
Right. It's a gamble for sure. But in a case this cold, any new lead could be the key.
It could be.
But what if the grand jury doesn't work out? What if no new evidence comes to light?
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean the case will remain unsolved forever. Cold cases have been solved decades later. Sometimes advances in DNA technology can help, or new witnesses come forward, or sometimes just having a fresh set of eyes look at the evidence can make all the difference.
That's true. Sometimes time can be an unexpected ally in these investigations.
It can. People's memories fade. loyalties shift, and someone who was once afraid to speak might finally find the courage to come forward.
It's happened before. And even if Michelle's case isn't officially solved, the pursuit of justice for her has already had a significant impact.
Oh, how?
Well, it's exposed flaws within the justice system. Remember, Josh Kazza was exonerated because of this.
Right.
And it sparked a conversation about the reliability of jailhouse informants and the importance of rigorous forensic analysis. And it's shown us the power of one individual, like Sheriff Walter, to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult.
Absolutely, and let's not forget about Josh Kazer's incredible resilience and compassion.
Yeah. He came out of this nightmare, determined to make a positive difference in the world. He could have been bitter and angry, but he chose forgiveness instead.
That's truly remarkable.
It is. It's a powerful reminder that even in the face of immense injustice, humanity can prevail.
It can.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this complex and unresolved case, we encourage you to keep thinking about it, to revisit the evidence, ponder the various theories. Maybe you'll come up with your own conclusions.
Yeah, these unsolved mysteries, they have a way of staying with us, making us question and analyze and search for answers.
They do. And maybe, just maybe, someone listening right now holds that missing piece of the puzzle. Maybe a long-forgotten memory will come back. Or a seemingly insignificant detail will suddenly make sense. Or maybe someone will finally feel compelled to come forward and tell the truth.
It's possible.
It is. The mystery of Michelle Lawless's murder remains unsolved. But the search for answers continues.
It does.
And we hope that one day justice will be served. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another captivating story. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking the truth.